Me, this is a truly philosophical, not a medical question. Moreover, as far as I know, this works both in Russia and in Ukraine. Legislation where soldiers' material is stored for a certain long period, so that actually be reborn for fertilization. This is some kind of new fashion. It's very strange for her somehow right now from the point of view. Well, perhaps there is some kind of technical, technocratic meaning in this. But it probably helps a soldier on the battlefield. That is, I think that this is a psychological element, of such well, that is, relatively speaking, person on the battlefield who is fighting probably feels so much calmer, that there is hope, let's say, that he will really be reborn. Well, they're in the children. Unfortunately, I have not read any such studies, that is as it were well from a philosophical point of view. It's not even philosophy, but psychology. I think it's a form like this, well, an attempt, well, not to add motivation. It's not a question of motivation, but to support it somehow, let's call it that, because it is clear that whether it will be used, it will not be used, well, no soldier knows this. But at least there is some hope. Well, he won't know if, yes, and by and large, will not know. But it probably helps somehow. But here, it is necessary to ask people from the front line. It helps them, it does not help, well, from the point of view of logic. I would say, probably so. The most interesting survey, the most interesting study in Ukraine was given out. Well, first of all, yes, the director of the Sociological Institute said, among other results, yes, this is what 8% of men in Ukraine, according to polls, are ready to take up arms and go to the armed forces. A strange percentage. And other studies are also very indicative, as it were, that 52 or 53% of them are normal to deviators. Well, with understanding, I mean it's fine. That is, they express understanding. 17% are categorically against it. The rest are difficult to answer there. And in parallel, well, about the survey, 43% of respondents feel they're, well, like Ukrainians. Say that Ukrainians should be ashamed of deviators. In any case, if you look at it this way, well, as fluently as possible, and so don't go into and pick at some percentages, formulations there, samples, and so on, then we can say that 50-50 relations in Ukraine. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but it's kind of normal. What is the evidence of this state of society in the third year of the war? About the split of society. It shows that this is one of the key lines of conflict in the future Ukraine, because, well, the outcome of the conflict is clearly disappointing. As if that's what Ukrainians hoped for in 2022 year. It's more or less obvious anyway, and against this background, there will arise in principle, well, it is already now in fact, there is this powerful split between those who fought and their families and those who did not fight and their families, especially against the background of the fact that since the autumn of the 22nd year, mobilization has ceased to be voluntary, as she was in the first 6 months. Got it. Well, complex, let's say, and incrementally complex. That is, now literally every day we see scandalous news. Someone shot himself. Someone was beaten at the military enlistment office. Well, we can't hide it. A man who feels like he is in a concentration camp inside the country. In other words, we have already discussed this many times. Against this background, there is a split between those who conditionally, either voluntarily, or who were unlucky, but ended up at the front. In other words, this one, we can say, put the ultimate stake in this issue, and those who, as it were, sat out or decided not to participate in it. And against this background, yes, there may be a variety of consequences. That is, what are just the options we see of these consequences? The first one is obvious, it's a giant, well, that is, post-traumatic disorder, and the scale is all over the country. And here is just a tip again to all our viewers, everyone who, no matter which side of the front, it is your duty and your responsibility to save your heads, the heads of your loved ones. I mean psychological health. That is, to make sure not to listen to those who feed your neurosis, not to listen to those who he breeds there, relatively speaking. These crisis ones, that is, it is as simple as possible to observe psychological health. There it is better to pet the dog, there I do not know, hug someone, a child, or if possible. Well, the main idea is that this is a fundamental problem, because it is a derivative of we also know it perfectly well. This is, well, an increased level of violence, an increased level of criminality, which, given the prevalence of practically controlled weapons in Ukraine, will lead to a very large number of tragedies. This is the first one. The second is the so-called Weimar syndrome. That is, soldiers who have returned their own and have not found themselves in this new life, they are most likely, if they find them, because, well, conditionally they cease to be soldiers, who will pay them this money, such as they receive now. And in general, it will be like in Vysotsky's song, and I, what did I fight for? And different epithets. Yes, here is conditionally this whole component. Then from this environment, from this soil, there can be a variety of consequences starting there. Someone will conditionally go to right-wing organizations, extreme right-wing organizations. Someone will go in general, I do not know, to Africa, to Latin America, somewhere else, to apply the acquired skills in practice. There will still be a big conflict in society. I mean, well, it's an obvious problem. In other words, we intuitively understand that these are two halves of the country, which are clearly different from each other. Again, even along this line, this is a very big difference. They are really different, and from the point of view of any political theory, it is also difficult to say with equal rights that a person who risks his life for the country, a person who risks nothing, has equal political rights. Neither in Rome was it like that, nor in ancient Greece was it like that, but in the framework of democratic states, as it should be. In other words, the conflict between what people will consider right and what is written in the Constitution will, to put it mildly, spread very much. And a separate element on the nearest one, even within the framework of this question, is a very good paradox. You said, Ukrainians don't want to die, but they want help. In other words, here is a contradiction that is also unclear how to solve. Even imagine that you are in power. How will you work with these two conflicting desires for him? In other words, fundamentally summing up, this is, of course, a very big split, which will only grow over the coming years. Well, we see these videos of conflicts with people in military uniforms already appearing in transport, which I was there in the Donbass. And you weren't there, it goes there 4 generations too. And I'll take you there. And I didn't send you. Yes. Well, look, it's interesting that in Russia they also beat the participants of their own? Much less. The mass recruitment of the Russian army is still going on a voluntary basis. That is, why are they being beaten? Well, there are individual cases again. We're going to talk about the masses. Look, but these cases, which are known about, they have been around for a while. I mean signs of on the one hand, and on the other hand, they look about the same, in the sense of looking the same. These are grenades, and fights, and some kind of. They look the same, the proportions are different. If we are serious, however, let's just fix it. The work on overcoming and psychological rehabilitation of the military in both countries is unsatisfactory. But just fix it. In other words, this is a problem for which not enough funds are allocated in the conditions of such large-scale content. That is again, well, the state, frankly speaking, does not finalize either there or here. As a result, this leads, well, to such excesses. But if we are talking about a vector, then as if by a vector, let's say, well, again, whoever has more resources will overcome this problem in theory and so on, if there is a desire. The problem of Ukraine is that it is very expensive for her. Rehabilitation of military personnel is a big expense. Where will you get the money for anti-rehabilitation? A matter of principle. This is a really big topic that is not going anywhere. And it is reinforced by this key problem of the Central Committee. But it is amplified by TCC. That is, how would you see the problems with excesses, people with on both sides of the front, but unfortunately, these sour beads. Well, we have seen all these shots. We will not repeat again, but where do they come from, and in what quantity? Yes, that is as it were, this is what enhances the difference. And against this background, let's finish this topic about the responsibility of the media and the responsibility of experts. Well, that is, forgive me. And when most of the experts are busy with what exclusively inflates hatred and hype, well, drives people crazy. Let's speak in direct words, with a variety of things and unrealistic expectations. And well, just outright lies, and well, just hyping, that is, dehumanizing epithets, the so-called gone for journalism.
Ну, просто хайпованием, то есть расчеловечиванием, эпитетов, так называемая гонза
What
журналистики.
is the
Что такое гонза
pursuit of
журналистика?
journalism?
Когда вы
When you savor
смакуете труп,
corpses,
ну, откровенно
well,
говоря, вот
frankly
с таким
speaking, with
причмокиванием,
this smacking. Look
смотрите,
how
как
these are burning there.
эти
Yes,
горят,
these
эти
died.
умерли.
That is,
То есть
that's
вот
all.
это
But
все.
what do
Как
you
вы
think?
думаете, тоже,
Immediately, what
какое
effect did this
влияние
have
это
on a
оказывает
balanced
на
psyche? By the
уравновешивание всех?
way,
Кстати,
this brings
возвращаясь
us
нас
back to the
сначала
beginning of
нашего
our
разговора о
conversation
проблеме
about the
терроризма.
problem of
То есть у
terrorism.
вас
In other
количество
words,
людей с
you have
расшатанной
a number of
психикой,
people with a shattered
один круг,
psyche, one
постоянно
circle,
растущий.
constantly
У
growing.
вас
You
круг
have a
людей,
circle of
которые от
people who are
природы
not naturally
действительно
very
одарены,
gifted, to put
мягко
it
говоря.
mildly.
Ну,
Well, again,
опять-таки,
I
я
do
не,
not
не,
know
не
how
знаю,
to
как
say this
это
politically
сказать
correctly,
политкорректно, чтобы
so
не
that
наводить
YouTube does not
стереотипный
ban you,
забанит,
if
но
anything.
правда,
But the
в
truth is,
человеческой
there really
популяции
is,
действительно
well,
есть,
the
ну,
notorious normal
пресловутое
distribution in the
нормальное
human
распределение.
population.
Условно говоря,
Relatively
там
speaking, there are
10%
10% of
очень
very
умных,
smart people,
1% гениев, но, к
1% of
сожалению, мы
geniuses,
это
but
как бы эту
unfortunately, we
сторону
know and love this
распределения очень
side of the
хорошо знаем и
distribution
любим,
very
но, к
well.
сожалению,
But
оно и в обратную
unfortunately,
сторону
it also
работает. Есть
works in the
10%
opposite direction.
как
There
бы
are 10%, as it were, alternatively
не
gifted,
очень.
alternatively yes,
Альтернативно, да,
alternatively gifted. And
альтернативно,
now
да.
imagine, you
И
say,
теперь представьте,
well,
вы скажете, ну,
10%, and
10%,
there's
там
another
внутри
1%
10 еще
inside 10.
1%.
Well,
Ну, и
and
такая,
such.
ну,
Well,
представьте, 20,
imagine,
даже
well,
20 миллионов
even 20
человек.
million
Что
people.
такое
I
даже,
don't know what it
не
is
знаю,
there,
10%
10%
от
of
20
20
миллионов
million
человек
people.
или 2
That's 2 million,
миллиона.
damn it.
1%
1%
это все
is
равно
still
200,
200,000.
тысяч особо одаренных
200,000
на
especially
фоне этой
gifted.
мимертизации, да,
Against the background of this nonvertization, nightmarish
кошмарные
proportions.
пропорции.
That
То
is,
есть,
again, we
опять-таки,
cannot
мы не
rely on the
можем на
universe, on
Вселенную,
the
там, на
world,
мир,
on
на
God,
Бога или
or on
на
the
там,
fact
то,
that
что
no
мы
one
будем
is
чем
doing
делать. То,
anything.
что мы
What we can
точно можем
definitely do
делать
now
сейчас, это
is to take
блюсти
responsibility
ответственность за
for
самих себя.
ourselves.
То есть не
That is, do
раздувайте
not inflate
невроз.
the neurosis.
Это
This
и
also
вам, и
applies to their
и
speakers,
спикерам,
but
но и
also to the
зрителям. Вы что
audience.
же,
So,
уважаемые
dear
зрители,
viewers,
какие
what news
новости
do you
чаще
most
всего друг
often
другу
like to
любите
send to each
присылать?
other?
С
With a peppercorn,
перчинкой, с
with a
остротой,
sharpness,
вот чтобы
that's to
нервы
tickle the
пощекотать.
nerves. Everyone has
Ответственность
a
каждого.
responsibility.
Опять-таки, вы не
Again,
можете
you can't
отменить все
undo
зло
all
в
the
мире.
evil in the
Вы
world,
можете
but you
сделать
can
очень
do a
простую
very
вещь, не
simple
пропустить
thing.
его через
Don't let
себя.
it pass through you.
Это
This is your zone.
ваша зона.